A single kiss was never supposed to mean anything, until it landed on the mouth of the most dangerous man in Seoul, and something ancient and starving woke up behind his eyes. Now Gina cannot walk into a room without his shadow finding her first. He calls it business. Everyone else calls it obsession. She is about to learn there is no version of this story where she walks away untouched. Welcome to Afro-Korea TV. Please like, share and subscribe. The elevator doors opened a half-second too early. Gina stumbled forward, arms full of orientation folders, heels catching on the marble threshold, and collided chest-first into a wall of black wool and cedar cologne. Her mouth mid-apology met his. For one full second, neither of them moved. He tasted like whiskey and restraint. She tasted like panic. And when she wrenched back red-faced, murmuring I'm so sorry, the man before her didn't blink, didn't scowl. He simply touched 2 fingers to his own lips, as though checking that the moment had actually happened. Seo Jun-woo did not get surprised. Not in boardrooms, not in back-alley negotiations, not when rival syndicates put a price on his head. But this small, curvy stranger with ink-stained fingers and wide, terrified eyes had just done what no bullet ever managed. She'd stopped him cold. "You're new," he said. "Not a question. Marketing intern. First day." "I am so sorry, sir, I didn't see." "Jun-woo." He said his own name like an order. "Not sir." She blinked. Nobody in this building called the CEO of Wu Dynasty Holdings by his first name. Nobody outside this building knew that Wu Dynasty was a glittering front for something far older and far more lethal. A name whispered in Gangnam penthouses and dockside warehouses alike. The CEO syndicate, and the man who ran it with a scalpel-cold smile. Gina didn't know any of that yet. She only knew she'd just kissed her new boss's boss, and she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. She fled into the crowded lobby, folders clutched to her chest like armor, cheeks burning. Behind her, Jun-woo remained exactly where he stood, one hand still faintly resting against his own mouth, watching the doors of the elevator close over the space where she'd disappeared. Something unfamiliar cracked open in his chest, a door that had been welded shut since he was 19 years old and learned that wanting things only ever gave the world new places to cut you. His assistant found him 3 minutes later, still standing in the same spot. "Sir, the board is waiting." "Cancel it," Jun-woo said. "Find out who that girl was." Gina spent the rest of the morning convinced she was about to be fired before lunch. She replayed it over and over on the walk to her cubicle, the folders slipping, the wrong angle, the brief, humiliating press of her mouth against a stranger's. A very well-dressed stranger. A stranger whose eyes, dark and startled and something else entirely, she could not stop thinking about. "You look like you saw a ghost," said Mira, the girl in the cubicle beside her, unwrapping a sandwich with the calm of someone who had clearly never accidentally assaulted a company executive with her face. "I think I just ended my career," Gina muttered. "On your first day. That's actually impressive. What happened?" Gina told her, voice dropping to a whisper by the end. Myra's sandwich stopped halfway to her mouth. "Wait. Tall. Black suit. Scar through his eyebrow. Looks like he could end a man's whole bloodline with one sentence." "Yes." Mira set the sandwich down entirely. "Gina. That's CEO Jun-woo. That's the CEO. That's, okay, you need to understand something. Nobody touches that man. Nobody talks to that man unless he talks first. There are rumors he isn't just running Wu Dynasty. There are rumors, okay, just rumors, that his family used to run half the ports on the West Coast, and not the legal half." Gina's stomach dropped somewhere around the floor. "You're telling me I put my mouth on a mafia boss?" "I'm telling you," Mira said solemnly, "that you might want to update your resume just in case." By 3 o'clock, a courier arrived at Gina's desk carrying a single black orchid in a slim glass vase. No card. No note. Just the flower, and the way every head in the marketing department turned to watch it get delivered, and the way none of them said a single word about it out loud. By 4 o'clock, her supervisor pulled her aside, bewildered and a little pale. "Mr. CEO has requested you be reassigned. Executive floor. Starting tomorrow." He wants you on the new brand campaign personally. He never does that, someone whispered from the next desk over, half terrified, half impressed, the way people speak about lightning that has just struck close enough to feel the heat of it. Gina's stomach dropped again, lower this time. This wasn't punishment. This was a leash, soft, elegant, and utterly inescapable. The next day, she was summoned to the top floor for the first time. Glass walls on every side, a sweeping view of the Han River glittering silver in the afternoon light, and Junwoo standing with his back to the room, hands in his pockets, radiating the kind of stillness predators wear right before they move. "You could have transferred me somewhere else," she said before she could stop herself, the words tumbling out before fear caught up to them. "Punished me. Fired me. Instead you gave me a promotion I didn't ask for." He turned. His eyes did something complicated. Amused, hungry, guarded, all at once, like a man watching something valuable walk toward the edge of a cliff and deciding, against his better judgment, not to stop it. "I don't punish people for things I enjoyed." Her breath caught somewhere in her throat. That's wildly inappropriate, and also completely unprofessional. And I would like to point out that I could report this. "You could," he agreed, unbothered. "Would you like to?" She should have said yes. She said nothing at all. "Good night, Junwoo," she whispered instead, and this time when she leaned across the console, it was her mouth that found his. The second kiss was nothing like the accident in the elevator. This one was a choice, made slow and deliberate, searching. His hand cradled her jaw like she was something rare he was terrified of breaking, and when she finally pulled back, breathless, his forehead rested against hers, both of them unwilling to close the last inch of distance again and equally unwilling to give it up. "You have no idea what you just started," he murmured against her mouth. "Tell me anyway." He didn't. Not yet. But his silence, this time, was its own kind of promise, the kind men like him didn't make lightly, because men like him understood exactly what it cost to break one. The following morning, Gina woke up smiling for the first time in longer than she could remember, and hated herself a little for it, because smiling over a man who'd all but admitted to being dangerous felt like standing too close to a fire and calling the warmth a comfort. She went to work anyway. She always would, she was starting to realize. That was the problem. A week later, the danger Junwoo had been quietly shielding her from finally had a face. Han Tae-shik, heir to a rival syndicate and a man who had hated the CO name since his own father lost a decade-long war for the Docklands, strolled into Wu Dynasty's lobby uninvited, flanked by two men in tailored suits that did nothing to disguise what they were underneath the fabric. He didn't come to see Junwoo. He came to see the girl everyone in 3 different circles was suddenly talking about. "So this is her," Tae-shik said, circling Gina's desk like a shark testing unfamiliar water, close enough that she instinctively leaned back in her chair. "The one who cracked CO Junwoo's ice. I have to say, I understand the appeal." Security arrived within 90 seconds. Junwoo arrived within 60. The room's temperature seemed to physically drop the moment he stepped through the glass doors, calm in a way that was far more frightening than shouting would have been. "Tae-shik, you're on the wrong floor. Wrong building. Wrong city, if you're smart enough to remember what happened the last time you weren't." "Just introducing myself." Tae-shik's smile didn't reach his eyes. It never did. "She's lovely. Fragile though. Things that are precious to you tend to break so easily, Junwoo. Ask your mother." Something flickered across Junwoo's face. Old grief weaponized instantly into fury, a wound Tae-shik clearly knew exactly where to press. Junwoo said nothing. He didn't have to. 2 of his own men appeared at the elevator without being summoned, and Tae-shik, still smiling, allowed himself to be walked out, throwing one last unhurried glance over his shoulder at Gina. "See you soon." The doors closed. The floor exhaled. Gina realized her hands were shaking. "Who was that?" she said. "And what did he mean about your mother?" Junwoo didn't answer. Not there. Not yet. But that night, for the first time, he told her to come up to the penthouse instead of driving her straight home, and she understood without being told that the silence was finally about to end. That evening, Junwoo finally told her everything, not because he wanted to, but because pretending was no longer an option that either of them could survive. The syndicate his grandfather had built from nothing but desperation and dockside violence in the years after the war. His father's death when Junwoo was 19. Not illness, not accident, but a bullet meant to send a message to anyone who thought the CO empire could be taken by force instead of earned. The empire Junwoo inherited that same week, built on both legitimate ambition and blood debts, he never asked for and had spent a decade trying to pay down without losing himself in the process. The enemies, Taeshik chief among them, who would use anyone close to him as leverage, the way you'd use a knife against an opponent who'd finally, foolishly, exposed his own throat. "I should have told you before I let this go further," he said, unable to meet her eyes. Hands clasped so tightly together his knuckles had gone pale. "I should have let you walk away in that elevator and never looked twice. But you didn't." "No, couldn't. I've made a lot of controlled, careful decisions in my life, Gina. Every single one of them since I was 19 years old. You are the first thing I have wanted that I couldn't calculate my way through, and it terrifies me more than any enemy ever has." She should have been terrified too. Instead she reached for his hand, the hand that had, by every rumor, ended men's careers and possibly worse, and held it like it was the safest thing in the world. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly. "But you have to stop deciding things for me. Car, the driver, Daniel, all of it. Let me choose this too with my eyes open, or don't let me choose it at all." His eyes glistened, just barely, just once, in a way she suspected he would deny to his grave. "Okay." A few days later, the catalyst arrived in the worst possible form. A storm, both literal and otherwise. Torrential rain grounded the entire city as an anonymous tip reached Junwoo late in the evening. Taeshik's men had been surveilling Gina's apartment building for the better part of a week, patient, methodical, exactly the kind of quiet that preceded the kind of loud Junwoo had spent his whole life trying to keep away from anyone he loved. He arrived at her door soaked through, chest heaving, eyes wild with something between fury and fear that she had never once seen on him before. Not even the day Taeshik walked into the lobby uninvited. "Pack a bag. You're staying with me until this is handled." "Junwoo, please." The word cracked out of him, raw and unpracticed. A man who never begged, begging now, standing dripping in her doorway like the storm outside had gotten inside his chest as well. "I can't lose you over my mistakes. I won't survive it, and I have survived a great many things I shouldn't have." She didn't argue a second time. That night, in the penthouse above the city, thunder rattling the wide windows, the fear and adrenaline and weeks of restrained longing finally broke loose. He kissed her like an apology and a vow all at once, both hands framing her face like she might vanish if he let go, and when she pulled him closer instead of pulling away, when her fingers curled into his shirt and his hands trembled, actually trembled, this untouchable, unshakable man, against her waist, neither of them spoke another word for a long, long time. The city outside disappeared entirely. There was only warmth and closeness, and the terrifying, unfamiliar safety of being wholly seen by someone who had already decided, somewhere in the quiet architecture of his own ruined and rebuilt heart, that he would burn the world down for you and call it a fair trade. Some hours later, curled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat finally slow into something steady, Gina felt the old fear creep back in through the cracks, the way it always did once the storm outside quieted down enough to let her think again. He's the most powerful, most guarded man in the country. Men like that don't stay soft in the daylight. Come morning, this will feel like a mistake he can't take back, and I will be the one left holding all of it. She waited until his breathing evened out into sleep, and quietly she left before sunrise, note folded on the kitchen counter, heart in her throat the entire elevator ride down. By morning, Junwoo woke to an empty bed and something close to panic clawing up his throat, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was 19 years old, kneeling on wet pavement beside his father's body, understanding for the first time that some losses arrive with no warning at all. He found her note propped against the coffee maker. "I don't want to be a weakness you regret. Sorry." He didn't call. He didn't text. Calling felt like something that could be ignored, deflected, deleted. He went to find her instead. He tore through the city in the gray, rain-washed light of early morning, Her apartment first empty. The office too early for anyone to be there. The small cafe near the river where he'd noticed weeks ago without ever saying so. She liked to hide during her lunch breaks when the noise of the office got to be too much, until finally he found her sitting alone on a bench near the water, exactly where it turned out she used to go as a child whenever she needed to feel invisible for a while. "You don't get to disappear on me," he said, breathless, standing in front of her like a man who'd been running for hours, because he had been, coat still damp from the storm the night before. "I'm not a weakness, Junwoo. I'm a target. There's a difference, and it's the difference that gets people killed in your world. You are not a target. You are the only thing in my life that has ever felt like it belonged to me, and not to my father's ghost, or my grandfather's debts, or my enemy's endless list of things to take from me. I am not letting you walk away because you're frightened of being loved carelessly. I have never done anything carelessly in my entire life, Gina. Not once. Not until you." Her eyes filled despite herself. "That's not fair. Neither is losing you." He knelt in front of the bench, right there on the wet gravel path, uncaring of the ruined suit, taking both her hands in his like something he had no intention of ever letting go of again. "I am asking you to be brave with me. Not despite the danger. Because of it. I would rather spend one terrified year loving you out loud than 100 safe, silent ones without you in them at all." She was crying now, openly, and so quietly was he. The first tears she would later learn that he had allowed anyone to witness since the day he buried his father. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. I'm staying. I'm not running again." The following week, Tae-shik made his final move. It happened outside Gina's building, in the gray hour just before dusk. A van idling too long at the curb, two men crossing the street with a particular unhurried confidence of people who believed they had already won. It was thwarted only because Junwoo's men had never actually stopped watching, storm or no storm, apology or no apology. The promise he'd made in the rain translated into something far more concrete than words. Eyes on every entrance, every exit, every hour of every day since the night he'd shown up soaked on her doorstep. Junwoo himself arrived in time to put his own body between Gina and the men sent for her. A scar above his ribs he would carry for the rest of his life, earned in the space of 4 violent, chaotic minutes, protecting the one thing in this entire war he refused, absolutely and finally, to lose. The confrontation that followed was swift and merciless, conducted in the kind of silence that men who have buried enough people learn to move through without flinching. Tae-shik was dealt with, permanently removed from any position to threaten either of them again, in ways this story need not detail, only that the syndicate war which had shadowed Junwoo's entire adult life finally, truly, after a decade of quiet grief and careful calculation, came to an end that night. Gina sat beside him afterward in the back of a car that smelled faintly of rain and copper, pressing a shaking hand to the makeshift bandage at his side, and did not let go of him once for the entire ride home. "You could have died," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't. That's not the same as being okay." "No," he agreed, tired, and for once entirely without armor. "It isn't. But I'd do it again. I'd do it every time, for as long as you'll let me." A month later, once the wound had healed and the city had quietly returned to whatever passed for normal in a life like his, Junwoo brought Gina to the same stretch of riverbank where he'd found her on that gray morning bench, the water calm now, gold with late afternoon light instead of storm dark. He got down on one knee in front of the woman who had once accidentally kissed him in an elevator on her very first day of work and never, in any of the ways that mattered, left again. "I told you once I'd burn the world down for you," he said, voice unsteady for the first time anyone in his organization had ever witnessed, hands trembling faintly as he opened a small box. "I'd rather build one with you instead. Whole life. Something that isn't just debts and enemies and old grief. Something that's actually, finally, mine to keep. Ours to keep." She said yes before he even finished the question, both hands cupping his face, laughing and crying at the same time in a way that made every hardened, watchful man standing discreetly out of sight along the riverbank pretend very hard not to notice. 1 year later, the penthouse that had once felt like a fortress, guarded, cold, built for survival rather than living, had become, finally, a home. Warm light in every window. No need for a single guard posted in the hallway anymore. because for the first time in Junwoo's adult life, the danger was genuinely gone, and only love remained to fill the space it left behind. Gina rested a hand over the gentle curve of her stomach one quiet evening as her husband pressed a kiss to her temple from behind, murmuring soft, half-formed promises to the child who hadn't yet met the world, about a father who would move mountains for them without a second thought, and a mother who had once been brave enough to kiss a total stranger in an elevator and, without meaning to, change both their lives forever. Love had conquered the danger. It had conquered his ghosts, one by one, the way patient water eventually wears down even the hardest stone. It had conquered her fear of being someone's weakness, and taught her, slowly, that she had only ever been his greatest strength. And as the city lights came on below them, glittering gold across the same river where it had all nearly ended and instead, finally, truly began, it was only just beginning. Her lips landed on his by accident, and in that 1 second, the most feared man in Seoul stopped being untouchable. Now his men whisper that he's changed. His enemies whisper that he's exposed. And she's starting to realize there is no walking away from a man who has already decided she's his. The only question left is what he's willing to burn down to keep her. One wrong step, one stolen kiss, and Seoul's most dangerous man locked his eyes on her like prey he'd already decided to keep. She thought it was an accident. He thought it was fate. Someone is about to be very, very wrong. They warned her never to look the Mafia boss in the eye. She kissed him instead. Now his enemies are circling. His obsession is growing, and she's trapped between the safest arms in the city and the most dangerous man in it. He built an empire on fear and never once flinched, until a stranger's kiss on his first day in turn nearly brought him to his knees. Now everyone wants to know, what does the untouchable Seo Junwoo do when he finally wants something he can't control?